Do you remember when Star Wars was good? From the amazing storytelling, characters we loved to see grow and develop, action scenes that felt both exhilarating and captivating without compromising basic logic or established rules within the universe. Remember how even with the prequels, the fan base was big and going strong? Yeah, I remember. So what happened? How did one of the biggest film franchises of all time start to lose both money and viewers with each new installment they do? That, my friend, is the question I will try and answer today. How did the series go from a cultural phenomenon that even at its silliest still brought in the big bucks and still keeping a strong fan base with hope for the future to a dull, lifeless shell of its former self only being kept on life support by a small minority of people who will love your work if you jingle enough member berries and fan service in their face? They will treat you like second coming, basically. A literary genius for essentially writing fan fiction that even for Tumblr is subpar. What happened to Star Wars? Well, let's start from the beginning of this downward spiral that Lucasfilm put Star Wars in, shall we? Editor's note, I will refer to Lucasfilm and even Marvel brand as Disney due to the fact that Disney basically owns and has the final say with what is allowed. So if you get confused, basically Disney, Lucasfilm, and Marvel are all one and the same. Also, my audio messed up in the first part of me talking about Star Wars, and it took a while to fix it, so sorry about that. But anyways, on with the video. On December 21st, 2012, Disney bought Lucasfilm and every film they had produced. The reason George Lucas sold his company, in his own words at least, I decided I'd rather raise my daughter and enjoy life for a while. Coupled with the fact how often his prequel trilogy were criticized, he probably just wanted to give the reins to someone else to get rid of that extra stress. After the purchase, Disney and Lucasfilm decided to work on episode 7 of the franchise. During this time, hype within the fan base has never been higher. The thought of seeing our favorite characters on the big screen again, teaching the next generation of Jedi and Rebels, was a pretty awesome idea. It also helps to know that Disney had success with this sort of business practice before, case in point Marvel, which over the summer of that same year experienced major success with the Avengers. Not only did the film net them over $1 billion in revenue, but also gain another fan base that will ultimately come running towards Disney for more Marvel. So it seems that Disney should have some knowledge on how they would make money with popular brands. It would be careless for Disney to mess this up. They can literally do whatever they want. So, what do they decide to do? While working on episode 7, Disney ran into a problem. See, there already exist stories that take place after episode 6 that the fans love, called the Expanded Universe. Basically, what the EU was were beloved stories like Heir to the Empire or Revelations, and having new and interesting characters that quickly became fan favorites alongside already loved ones from the films. These books are already good starting off points that Disney could have easily start with. However, Disney would not only ignore the EU, but they would also decanonize them. The books would end up being relabeled as legends so they don't fit within the Disney canon. This would be a poor decision on Disney's part, but I'll explain that later. Disney would end up taking some inspiration from the EU, only to change everything to make it their own.
I got a bad feeling about this.
After 3 years of the purchase, Disney and Lucasfilm finally released Episode 7, The Force Awakens. During this 3-year gap, the hype for Star Wars content has been at an all-time high, with only one TV show to hold everyone over. Even with the fear of this movie being the worst Star Wars film ever, the excitement fans had for this film trumped those thoughts. So after years of seeing behind-the-scenes photos and videos, possible leaks, trailers, and interviews with cast members, the film released December 18, 2015. Almost 3 years exact, just a few days off from when Disney purchased it. Easy to say, it was a financial success. Making over $2 billion at the box office and landing a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, it was going well for Disney. Not to mention, people had nothing but love for the film upon release.
Now, I grew up loving the original trilogy. If you've watched my channel this year, you've seen me review every single episode leading up to this, all the way from Phantom Menace to Return of the Jedi. I've had my thoughts about each one, but I've really only loved 2 of them, A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back. Well, now it's 3. The Force Awakens.
The sound editing is fantastic because it's also familiar. Not only is it an exciting action sequence happening, but you're like, those sound effects, I grew up on them. Oh my god, it's all new. It's blowing my mind. And the characters were great too. All right, John Boyega and Daisy Ridley have great, bright careers ahead of them. If there were new characters they were going to introduce to the Star Wars saga as the main characters of a movie, I'm glad it's them.
So let's, without any spoilers, talk about Kylo Ren. Oh my goodness gracious, I love this guy. What a great villain.
And I'll say without batting an eyelash, Star Wars The Force Awakens is awesome-tacular.
I'm gonna give Star Wars The Force Awakens an A.
These were just some of the things you would have heard during this time. Everyone treated this as the best Star Wars since the original trilogy. Star Wars The Force Awakens was the greatest thing to happen to Star Wars. For a month or so. Shortly after the excitement died down, a lot of the people started noticing the flaws with the film. The most noticeable criticism was with the treatment of legacy characters. Both Han Solo and Luke Skywalker were the two main characters from the original trilogy that have a long history of being more than just brothers in arms. Yet, both never meet throughout this new trilogy. In fact, there is not one scene where any of the legacy characters, including the main three, are on screen together. And that was the bare minimum fans wanted. Han Solo seems to revert back to his old ways, undoing his character arc he had in the OT, with the worst part being he never seems to redeem himself. Not really anyways. Solo is a sad, old, broken man going back to being a smuggler who barely has any confidence like he used to. To top it off, when his son turns to the dark side and destroys Luke's Jedi school and killing everyone who did not join him, Han runs off, abandoning his wife, Leia, because of his guilt. Many felt this was not in Solo's character, and he would have never left Leia, the love of his life, during this time. If Han came back for Luke when he didn't need to back in episode 4, he would have for sure stayed with Leia after losing their child. This was one of the many big problems with the film. Yet because it made money, Disney will ignore these criticisms and will continue with future projects without change. And while the next film, Rogue One, was a hit, there was one film that was not well received by many. A Star Wars film that now lives in infamy for dividing and even reducing the fan base entirely. The film is known as Star Wars: The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi was the next episode in the now called Skywalker saga. There was more skepticism than excitement, especially with what they might do with Luke Skywalker, arguably the most beloved character in Star Wars. But there would be Star Wars fans there for the first week at least, so maybe word of mouth would help. But unfortunately for Disney, and even Star Wars, it was the opposite. The Last Jedi was released on December 15, 2017 to at best lukewarm positive reviews, and at worst, disdain for the movie, claiming the film ruined the Star Wars franchise. Of course, this was from longtime Star Wars fans. The high-paid film critics at Rotten Tomato have it at a 91% on the tomato meter, which went in opposition of the audience score, which was 42%, making it rotten, while on the other side it was considered certified fresh by paid critics. This was the point in time where people started to believe there was behind-the-scene fixing, which was confirmed true in 2023. Whether you liked TLJ or not, one thing was for certain. This was the point Star Wars would start to lose relevance. The Last Jedi's main complaints were the same as last time, but more amplified in my opinion, and as feared, it was Luke Skywalker's treatment that turned away fans. When we left off from Return of the Jedi, Luke was a Jedi Knight defeating both Darth Vader and the Empire. He even brought back his father, Anakin, from the dark side. Luke's decision to spare his father instead of killing him like Obi-Wan and Yoda told him to would turn out to be the best thing Luke does. He brought back Anakin, giving him his redemption and once again becoming a Jedi in his final hours with his son. Luke could have easily killed his dad and given in to the dark side too, but instead when he immobilizes Vader, he takes a moment before snapping back to reality and tosses his lightsaber, exclaiming to the Emperor,
"You failed, Your Highness. I am a Jedi, like my father before me."
Cementing Luke Skywalker as a noble peacekeeper of the galaxy, a true Jedi. Fast forward 34 years, and what does Disney decide to do with such a respected hero of the galaxy? All we know from the last entry of the mainline saga is that Luke went into hiding after Kylo Ren killed all the other students and destroying the Jedi school. He was never seen again, not even by his sister Leia. Damn, they really let two important figures of her life ditch her after her son turned evil. Wouldn't both of them just comfort her? Anyways, the first time we see Luke after decades of waiting, we see him being handed his old lightsaber he lost. And hopefully with the new writer and director, Rian Johnson, we will get some good answers to questions we have had since The Force Awakens. And maybe, just maybe, this character will be respected. So what happened with Luke in this film? How was this beloved Jedi written? How is Luke Skywalker treated? Oh, wow. He's a joke. Luke is now a bitter old hermit who wants nothing to do with the Jedi. In fact, he wants there to be no more Jedi ever again. The most optimistic person ever in the galaxy is nothing more than a sad, broken man who just wants to die. We did not even get to see him train any Jedi. The worst part, though, is how he became like this. We find out that he was sensing a darkness within his nephew, so much so that he decides to go into his room at night and try to get a Force vision. What he sees is death and destruction within him. So naturally, Luke would try and confront him and calmly and rationally.
And I was left with shame.
Or go from 0 to 10. Luke ignites his lightsaber and prepares to kill his nephew because of a bad dream. He only stops himself within seconds, realizing what he is about to commit. But when he looks back at him, he's awake and looking at Luke with fear. Ren grabs his lightsaber and hits Luke's saber before he caves in the room, trapping Luke. When Luke gets out, he sees that his students are slaughtered and his temple in flames. This is the reason for Luke leaving and going into hiding. This was also the final nail in Luke Skywalker's coffin. Disney allowed the most character-breaking moment in film history. How does a man who, after figuring out Darth Vader, the most ruthless killer in the universe, is his father and forgiving such a person, but his nephew has a nightmare and is getting visions, he decides to kill him? It does not matter if he did not go through with the action. The fact that he even thought about it enough to the point of whipping out his weapon and wielding it over his nephew has done significant damage to the character. To add insult to injury, the best defense for this action is that it's supposed to mirror the time Luke almost killed his father out of anger, like if those events are comparable in any way. Vader kept tempting Luke and even mentioned his sister to try and provoke him. Vader suggests bringing in Leia instead if Luke does not join him.
Your feelings for them are strong, especially for sister. So, you have a twin sister. If you will not turn to the dark side, then perhaps she will.
Obviously, Luke would react to this and goes on to fight Vader until he's on the ground and Luke cuts off his hand. After the Emperor sees him take down Vader, he offers Luke a place by his side to rule the galaxy. Luke quickly realizes that he needs to collect himself and not give in, a choice that nearly kills him until Vader steps in and saves Luke, proving to be a Jedi for sparing him and being rewarded for it. Cut back to now, and he's about to kill his own nephew with no prior physical confrontation, no threats being made, just a scary vision that Luke sees. Didn't Yoda teach you something about trusting visions and not going to violence first, back in like Empire Strikes Back? It's one thing to not make Luke a Jedi Master training the next generation, but to have him commit an un-Jedi-like action? This, along with poorly written plot, lore-breaking scenes, dull and boring new characters, pointless subplots that lead to nowhere, and all-around stupid moments that make you question the film.
That's how we're gonna win. Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
This movie did what no other film in this franchise could even do at its worst. The Last Jedi crippled the Star Wars fanbase to the point where future films like Episode 9 made the least amount of money in the sequel trilogy, and Solo, a Star Wars story, would be Star Wars' first ever box office bomb. However, there was one last Star Wars project that would try and bring people back, at least for a little bit.
Hold on to your butts.
I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
The Mandalorian debuted November 12, 2019 to fairly positive reception. The Mandalorian takes place a few years after Return of the Jedi, so already people started to like this a little more than the sequels. The show seemed to have more confidence in the mainline saga and spin-off films, which helped because it got people to like it more. The action seemed better at first, there's actual character development, or an attempt, but most importantly, it did not spit in the face of fans. This goodwill towards fans would help carry on to the second season, even with bad writing and a nonsensical plot armor. There was love for this show. The best way I could describe it is like going from school food to eating McDonald's. Though it is still not the best we can get, it is still more consumable than the prior. The second season also ends with a surprise appearance from Luke Skywalker, and while it was very key-jangly, it was still cool to see Master Skywalker in his prime, even if it was just fan service. This is all Disney has to do for fans and just make a halfway decent show that's fun to watch. To not upset fans, they have everything at this point. Disney has fans in a trance in which a huge majority will accept these shows as good. But Disney will break this trance with one real-world decision that was made that will lose them every goodwill they've made with fans. The decision to fire one particular actress. Gina Carano is a former women's MMA fighter who was skilled in Muay Thai, arguably the hardest martial arts known to man. Gina is the reason women's fighting is where it is today. Her star power helped pave the way for future female fighters like Ronda Rousey.
I know you hold Gina Carano in very high regard. Yesterday she tweeted this amazing response to me via Twitter, obviously, about what this weekend means to her. I'm wondering if you saw it and what you thought of it.
Yeah, I think I did see it. It was like a picture of a note that she wrote, right? Yeah. And it was like 2 pages.
Yeah.
I always thought she was a sweetheart and such just an elegant ambassador of the sport. And she's one of those people that can just do no wrong in my eyes. And so I was like, I saw that. I remember her manager sent it to me.
Do you think if she doesn't do what she did in 2007, Showtime, and then the Cyborg main event, all that you're not even here? Is that possible?
No, I don't think I would be here because the first women's MMA fight I saw was her and Julie Kedzie.
Right.
So I would not have even known it was an option for me. She's the one that planted the seed in my mind. And yeah, she's changed my entire life. And, thank God for that girl.
In her first film match, where 100 to 1,000 people were watching, she took down her opponent in 38 seconds in the first round. Gina was given roles in movies due to her athletic history, like Haywire, Fast and Furious 6, and Deadpool, but her most popular role was Cara Dune. Cara Dune, along with Grief Cargo and Mix Mayfield, quickly became fan favorites mainly due to their backstory. Cara is an ex-rebel shock trooper and is now a mercenary. Over the 2 seasons of the show, we learn more about her, like the fact that she's from Alderaan, the first planet to be completely destroyed by the Death Star, and that kind of loss made her join the rebels to fight the Empire. Her character arc would end up being to rejoin the rebellion, now known as the New Republic, as a sheriff on the planet Navarro. This, with Gina's MMA history, is what Disney technically wants in theory. A strong, independent woman who can hold her own and has been a role model for other women and who has been cited by other female fighters. So why did Disney fire her? Well, it was due to her internet posts at the time. When Disney fired her, they stated it was due to her posts online claiming they were both anti-vax and anti-Semitic. And of course, Disney does not want someone who is problematic. But that begs the question, what did the posts say? What was the horrific nature of these tweets? Well, let's take a look. Oh, I see. The post is basically saying don't turn on your neighbor by comparing turning in your fellow man for not taking a vaccine to 1940s Germany citizens turning in Jewish people just because of their status and beliefs. Gina was comparing two awful situations involving human rights violations. One more terrible than the other, obviously. And yet she got fired for that tweet being anti-Semitic? Many fans have noted that fellow actor Pedro Pascal said similar comparisons, making the comparison to immigrants being held in facilities to Jewish people being held in concentration camps, in harsher words. However, because he is more on the left side of politics, he will get a pass over Gina. People wonder if there was anything else that could have led to her firing, and unfortunately for Gina, there was. Gina had put up fake preferred pronouns on her Twitter bio that reads, boop, bop, beep. A seemingly harmless joke that got a small but vocal crowd to try and shame her. This led to the conclusion that it was not a toxic work environment or even her character being written off because they did not know what to do with said character. After all, she was going to get her own show, but rather an issue with identity politics. Another example of the totally not real cancel culture mob going after someone for having a different opinion. This decision to fire Gina would end up being catastrophic for Disney. Something they would underestimate is how big of a fan base Gina has. Many of the fans saw the treatment of such a person and thought how biased it was for Disney to fire someone for an opinion they had. Firing Gina Carano broke Disney's magical trance that they had on Star Wars fans. For the first time since 2019, Star Wars fans finally saw through the fan service and see the poorly written script and at best the half-decent action scenes. This loss of goodwill affected future shows like Boba Fett and even the Obi-Wan show. And when you think it can't get any worse for Disney, people started noticing a quality drop. From the action being terribly choreographed, the sets looking cheap and fake, to even going back to where we started and having characters being disrespected. So now what? I mean, there are only so many ways Disney can disrespect fans and treat you poorly. Surely there won't be another controversy that will make Disney Star Wars look worse than it already does. Right? Viewership for Star Wars entertainment has gone down after Season 2 of The Mandalorian, and one such example is Kenobi. 7 years ago, it would be unheard of for a Star Wars show based around Obi-Wan Kenobi to perform terribly with viewership. And yet, here we are in 2022, and Kenobi is getting smoked by Stranger Things Season 4 in public interest. It's truly amazing that they could not even get prequel fans to watch the show. One of the many complaints in this series had to do with characters like Reva. Reva is an Order 66 survivor and now Imperial Quizzer, a group of Force users tasked with hunting down the last of the remaining Jedi, and well, her character was received unfavorably. People who watched Kenobi noted that Reva is inconsistent with her morals and is just a psychopath.
This is the Outer Rim. You have no rights here. We're not under the Empire.
However, Disney wants you to feel empathy for this character despite what we've seen of her actions. This is the same tactic Disney would try to use for Carly in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but just like that show, most people with a functioning brain could see through the BS.
Our peacekeeping troops will begin relocating people soon. The terrorists only set us back a bit.
You have to stop calling them terrorists. There were still people in there.
This is the only language these people understand.
With the criticism of Reva, Disney and Lucasfilm wanted to address them. However, the way they go about it would be ill-received at best. A few faceless trolls on the internet would end up sending Moses Ingram, the actress who plays Reva, a bunch of DMs, most of which were racist. When Moses saw these messages, she posted them on her story and even did a live talking about said messages.
Sure. There are hundreds of those. Hundreds.
What followed was an overwhelming support for the actress from the press and even fellow cast members of the show like Obi-Wan himself, Ewan McGregor, talking about how they will not tolerate such bigotry.
It seems that some of the fan base, from this influential fan base, have decided to attack Moses Ingram online and send her the most horrendous racist DMs. And I heard some of them this morning and it just broke my heart. And if you're sending her bullying messages, you're no Star Wars fan in my mind. There's no place for racism in this world. And I totally stand with Moses.
It should go without saying derogatory comments about someone's race, gender, or orientation are not okay, and to treat someone because of those things makes you a horrible person. It's one thing to joke around with friends and make dark jokes, but to judge and call a person a racial slur is uncalled for. Fortunately for the human population, this is a statement most reasonable people agree with. Unfortunately for Disney, they seem to think this is why people hated Reva. Disney and the show's defenders would use what I like to call blanket stating for a group of fans. Any and all criticism towards the Reva character would be swept under the rug as racist attacks, even when race is not mentioned by said critics. The only time race or sex was brought up was when an agenda was talked about that Disney and other entertainment networks push, and in some cases make it seem like they were the first to do it. To have women, non-white, and gay characters was unheard of until we did it just now. This line of thinking that entertainment companies have led to an unspoken rule to have a certain amount of people from a particular group in your movies and TV shows, and in some cases make said group of people the most powerful in their universe without discipline, training, or even accountability for their past actions. This line of thinking hinders storytelling, but of course anytime people bring these identity political talking points up, you are called a reactionary or we're making everything political. Despite some of these shows and movies flat out showing us their political ideology. To top it off, the people who run these official Star Wars accounts seem to have no respect for some fans, even if the fan asks for something reasonable. When you ask to not make everything political, they will be sure to put you in your place by shaming you in front of thousands of people, a virtual tar and feathering if you will. After the Star Wars account puts you on blast, the defenders of these shows will rush to set accounts with their own quote tweets. Most of them were trying to dunk on the fan, with some of them being vulgar too. Between the hardcore sequel fans and people who love nothing but references to past Star Wars, it was pretty clear what kind of people Disney Star Wars would end up attracting. These people would end up being what's left of the Star Wars fan base, and be the only reason why Star Wars does not put any effort in these projects anymore. Star Wars is on its deathbed, and there may be no coming back. It makes OG fans wonder at this point what's going to happen after it's all said and done, and there is nothing more for Star Wars to do. What is the state of Star Wars? As of the time of this recording, Ahsoka just released their final episodes to less viewers than Kenobi. The problem with the series are the same with the other shows that I have mentioned. Terrible storytelling, characters doing nonsensical things, lore-breaking events, and now piss-poor choreographed fight scenes. Which is disappointing considering they had both Hayden Christensen, someone who perfected his fast-paced lightsaber skill, and Deanna Lee Santo, a trained martial artist and stuntwoman whose godfather is none other than Bruce Lee. It's such a waste to have such talented people, and yet for this show to not let us see that. Not to mention, it's really noticeable that they have to hold back their strength and speed for Ahsoka, because for some reason, even though Rosario Dawson is 44 years old, she moves like a sloth that took way too many edibles. I don't think people who even do Tai Chi are this slow. They didn't even try to hide it or get a stunt double. Fan films have a better choreographed fights, and I'm not even talking about the high production fan films that take place within the Star Wars world. I'm talking about random dudes just having fun by shooting a cool fight scene in a parking lot or a warehouse, and it is so much better. It makes you wonder, who's watching these shows again?
Oh my god!
Oh, right, them. The best way I can describe them is they're like mindless clapping seals enjoying the key jangling of their favorite things from Star Wars. 99% of their big reactions are because of these references, but in between the key jangling they seem to fake their reactions to look more excited. This is who Disney has courted. It is either shills or people who have rot their brain with bad Twitter takes. Ever since The Last Jedi, Disney tried everything to keep what little fans they had, even as going as far as to take stuff from both the prequel trilogy and the expanded universe, something Disney had denounced and made fun of. But even then, they failed to succeed with it. They could not even make Thrawn, someone who has physical capability and supreme intellect that could easily rival Vader's, show neither in the show. Pretty soon, though, there will be nothing left for Star Wars left to jangle in your face, and that's when Disney Star Wars has no one to watch their content. Despite Lucasfilm shills hyping up these shows, none of them are getting any viewers, or rather the amount Star Wars needs. Even Andor, arguably Disney's Star Wars' only good show, is not getting any traction. The apathy around Star Wars is astounding, and it's all thanks to how Disney started with the sequel trilogy, tearing down the old to make what they want, only to go back to the original trilogy timeline just to generate interest. But knowing that Disney won't redo the sequels makes it pointless. It's why a lot of people cannot watch the original trilogy the same way again. Because would it be satisfying to watch your favorite characters who grew to be wise, selfless, and high-ranking badasses just for Disney to revert, demote, and disrespect them? I think not. Other than the fake reactors, if you enjoy these shows, I'm not gonna bash you. I'm okay with you liking shows that I find logically dumb. It's not my goal to rip on people for their opinion. My goal is to explain the lack of interest and if it's justified. After the prequels were released, there was still interest in Star Wars to the point that Star Wars products had aisles to themselves. But now, if you walk into a store, you'll find most products dedicated to Disney Star Wars are usually on clearance, just so they can get rid of the stockpile they have. It seems like anything Star Wars is not selling like they used to, with the exception of Lego. One of Star Wars' biggest money makers is now barely selling anything unless you put Baby Yoda on it. Oh, my bad, Grogu. Star Wars is on life support at this point, barely getting any interest from fans. Star Wars has fallen, and it most likely won't get up for a long time, if ever it does. Star Wars, the once powerhouse of nerd culture, now reduced to low-quality, uninspired sci-fi TV. This is what's left of Star Wars. This is what Disney did to Star Wars. This is Star Wars going out, not with a bang, but with a whimper. This is the absolute state of Star Wars.